show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Coviello. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services. Sandy, how are you this week?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. We are coming back to a series of shows that we had begun before we had started celebrating the holidays, the holiday season in Walt Disney World. We're going to come back to the Adventures by Disney New Zealand trip that you were on, and we kind of left off really after day 3 when we realized there's just too much to talk about in one show. So we're going to split this into 2 additional shows, starting with day 4.
And I'm so happy to talk about it. It was a phenomenal trip. It brings me great memories. Coincidentally, one of the couples traveling on it called me this morning. I was on with them on another trip that they're looking at, but then he just kept saying, I want to make sure you know, it was a great trip. We loved being in New Zealand with you. It was a long trip. And there were times where it was like, oh my gosh, it's only day 4 and we've got, days to go. Again, in my case, I arrived 3 days early and I stayed 2 days late. So that certainly adds to it. But it went slow and it went fast and it went slow and it went fast all at the same time. But just so much fun, a gorgeous country, kind people. I think I mentioned in the last episode, this was not a bucket list trip for me. And I know that makes me sound like a horrible person. But my bucket list is huge and this was nowhere near the top. But I had the opportunity to escort a group, and kind of like some other places I've been, I don't know why it wasn't closer to the top. So definitely think about it. It is a gorgeous place to be, and you will enjoy it without a doubt.
Well, it's probably not at the top because it's literally as far away as you can go without you start coming back. I mean, it's literally totally around the world. But that being said, we hit those first 3 days. There's way too many days left on the trip to shortchange them. So let's begin with day 4. For those that want to go back and listen to the first 3 days, you can check us out in a couple of shows ago. But bring us back to this particular experience, starting with day 4.
So day 4 was actually one of my favorite days, and I know I say that a lot, because that was where we left off, my talking about my favorite day 3 in Rotorua at the Spellbound Cave.
Sure.
Day 4, we went to a Kiwi Hatchery, and Kiwi is just a term that gets very confusing when you're in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because we all know Kiwi is a fruit. Kiwi is also how they refer to themselves. I'm an American. I'm a Kiwi. That's their reference point for themselves.
Got it.
But Kiwi is also an animal, a little bird. And I don't know why. I think it's kind of like imagining the Roadrunner. You see pictures of Kiwis that are clearly, forced perspective or little drawings. Kiwis are very small animals, kind of the size of a baby chick when they are born. And so that is their national animal that they're so proud of. We head over to the Kiwi Hatchery. If you get really lucky, which we did, and I'm told that this was extremely rare, that our guides have only seen this a very few times. We actually saw a Kiwi hatch.
Oh, wow.
So, really neat. Again, it's an egged bird, so that little pecking to make its way out and learn all about them, their habitat, get a chance to interact more from a distance. You don't, hang out walking around with Kiwi, but that was neat. And then, again, they're a very high agricultural society. So from the Kiwi factory, we went for sheep shearing and learned all about how they shear sheep, what they do with the wool. It's a big production item for them.
Uh-huh.
And again, jam-packed day, because we did all of that and one more thing before we even got to lunch.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
We had zip lining and a canopy tour. And again, this is one of the great things with Adventures by Disney. They used to use the slogan, "We'll take you outside of your comfort zone." Those of you who've listened to older episodes, you've heard my Costa Rica ziplining story, so I won't bore you all with it again. It is most certainly outside of my comfort zone and something I don't need to do repeatedly. But I'm the opposite of many adrenaline junkies we had on our trip who were thrilled to do this zip. It is over an hour through multiple zips high up in the canopy. And while they will encourage you to do it, they'll even give you an opportunity to try it out before you do it. Once you start, it's not one of those things where you get to the first stop and go, all right, I'm done. You're kind of committed and you need to keep going. So if ziplining isn't for you, or we had a couple of people on our trip who had some recent injuries and were not able to zipline, there is a canopy walking tour. So kind of through that wooded area to see all the foliage, little insects, animals, and things through that area. So you're either on that adrenaline high or on that super zen time. It's an interesting
That's a fun juxtaposition right there. Yeah.
As you're at those polar opposites.
Yeah, definitely.
Time to change for dinner. And then one of the most memorable evenings I have ever had. The Moraes, which we talked about in the last episode a little bit, that's the original culture that came there. The Morae people invited us to their house. They call it a meeting house. And I think it's interesting because you see all these different religions and cultures. I'm not going to segregate them because I think there's such a huge crossover that have such similar ideas, even though everybody wants to talk about why they're different. At the root of it, I think they're all similar. They have a meeting house versus a church or a temple or a gathering house.
Okay.
And it's all about bringing family and friends together. And there is an entire ritual that you go through before you can enter the house. Interestingly, almost a little bit of, I would say, reverse Orthodox Judaism. They separate the women and the men for that ritual to enter the house, and the women go first.
Okay.
And you enter the house, and I think I had no idea what to expect. And for some of you who are thinking of this tour, don't go Googling to look at these pictures because I think you'll lose some of the impact.
Sure.
But the walls are covered with various size photos and different frames of people, individual headshots almost. And underneath them, nothing fancy. Some of them are just handwritten labels on a piece of white paper stuck to the bottom of the frame is the person's name. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I looked at it, I was like, this is like seeing an ofrenda. And it is the visual version of a Jewish yahrzeit board. Those pictures all represented people in this community that have passed.
Wow.
And so the walls are kind of divided very literally. I mean, there's a 2x4, might not be the right word, but a real piece of wood down, kind of, this is your section of the wall, this is my section of the wall. And you see this visual family tree of those who have passed. And it is stunning, which may be an inappropriate word. And if it is, I apologize to all of you, because it was breathtaking and moving. And it really just gave you a sense of who these people were.
Well, and I'm assuming the attention is that we're still all connected, whether we're there or not, right? I mean,
we're all connected. It had this silence to the meeting house, but there was nothing awkward about it.
Yeah.
You felt inclusion, you felt love and joy, and, the majority of the pictures weren't, like that old farmer picture where they're so serious. You see
right. Yeah.
that personality, and you're just so taken in. We were then invited to take part in the hangi nose touching ceremony, which I will say I was not the only one who visualized it differently.
Well, as you're saying it, I have a very, very specific visual, so please explain.
So the guides do try and discuss it. What I didn't realize, and I asked other people in my group if I just wasn't focusing enough to comprehend, and a couple of them were like, no, I got the same thing you did.
Right.
It was a family of 4 that welcomed us and talked to us about their meeting house and began this ceremony. And they invited you to kind of get in line. And the best way I can describe it, and you're all going to go, ooh, really? is like Eskimo kissing.
Sure. Well,
You
that
go
that was
up
what was
and
in my head. So
you rub noses. Well, I thought you did it, like if you and your wife were there, you and Erica would rub noses, but
right.
it's almost like a wedding receiving line. The family that invited us into their house, all of us went to each of the four people, down the row and rubbed noses with them.
Okay.
And it's more of a touch. It's like nose to nose and forehead to forehead versus a rub like an Eskimo kiss.
Right. Right.
And again, a quiet, solemn thing, but something where you really felt love. You didn't feel like this is a no talking time or anything like that.
Got it.
They then performed a Haka for us, which is their ceremony, kind of a big welcome type of ceremony. And the best laugh probably of my week is they then invited our gentlemen in our group to get up and perform this ceremony. And they did step by step of how to do it. And it involves a lot of arm movement. And there's parts where you stick your tongue out and you make wide eyes. So to see them all really getting into it and taking part was just a lot of fun. And again, when we talk about traditions and cultures and similarities, when we were done in their meeting house, we were taken outside to the hangi, which reminded me of my trip to Peru. The hangi is the traditional cooking of the meat. Similar to Peru, they dig a big hole in the ground, put some coals and heat it, and then they cook all the meat there, and then they pull it all out of this hole in the ground. It is very hot. It is all done on this big burlap kind of tarp. It used to be part of where the hangi came about is there are hot springs in the area. And if you were more patient than we were for dinner, the underground heat of the hot springs used to be what would cook their dinner.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like a little community. They have the area for cooking. They have their meeting house. They have a separate little building with bathrooms. And then they have a large community type hall. So we were able to dine in the community hall, which normally they can seat about 200 in there. They made a great buffet for us. Some other members of the community came in and sat with us, and we could ask them any kind of questions we wanted during dinner about what they were doing. We actually had the most well-spoken 11-year-old child I have ever met at our table who talked to us about her culture, but then also what it's like growing up in New Zealand and what activities she takes part in. So again, you just left there feeling like family. It was such a great experience.
And for those of you keeping score at home, that's day 4. That's one day. That Sandy just broke down
the
there.
Kiwi Hatchery, the sheep shearing, the canopy tour, the zip lining, and the Morae dinner all in one day. So I said it was a busy day, but it was a highlight day for me.
Well, so talk to us about then how that gets followed up, right, by day 5, because there's so much that was in day 4. What does day 5 look like after following a day like that?
So day 5 is a little calmer.
I would imagine so, yes.
One of the things is New Zealand is large. It's like saying, I'm coming to America and I'm going to see it all.
Right, yeah, impossible, sure.
We talked last episode, we traveled by planes, trains, motor coaches, boats. So the next day was a large travel day. But again, it's always nice. Disney doesn't want you to ever travel for more than 90 minutes without a break. So there are a lot of things along the way in your trips. They'll break things up. We did a little bit of our ride, and then we went to Te Puia, which, again, was another Morae community and another phenomenal experience. They have a workshop here where they do all the wood carvings that New Zealand is really known for. And you see an example of that pretty much the minute you land in the airport in Auckland, you start to see these carvings. And, it was kind of that moment of Imagineering for me. We were able to look into the workshop during our tour and watch them do carvings. And some of them are tiny pieces. Some of them are whole walls, monstrous pieces. There's some samples hanging on the wall that they can reference, but most of them are totally carving freehand. And when you see the finished pieces, you would have no idea, because there's such a regimented way that they're done that it's surprising to me that they're not marking it up more. I probably could have stood there and watched them for 2 hours. But they have a massive piece of land. So we were able to see them. We were able to head out. They've got a big waterfall out on their property. They've got a geyser that was going off. We took a little tram tour around to see some of the carvings actually out in the museum area. They were performing that ceremony that I talked about. Obviously, this was a large place. We had our own tour guide and a little different tour, but they were doing that hangi ceremony for others that were there for the day to experience it. They, of course, conveniently had a gift shop that we exited through.
No, of course not.
How convenient.
Yes.
And then we made our way over to the airport. So it was time for our plane. I will say that I personally hate tours that have a plane in the middle, but you can't help it. The flights are always, internal flights are always included by Adventures by Disney. So you get yourself to and from the destination. But if you're doing Peru, Galapagos, New Zealand, any of these that you fly in the middle, Adventures by Disney includes your plane ticket. So you're really kind of stuck. There's no picking your seat and upgrading your seat. And
Right.
for somebody like me, where you've got to meet regular airline luggage requirements, and some places like New Zealand and even a lot of parts of Europe weigh what they call your hand luggage. So your carry-on gets weighed before you can make it into the boarding area.
Right.
And so they're going to weigh it and mark it. And for somebody like me and several others in our group, our carry-ons were overweight. My computer by itself is pretty much the carry-on limit. But thankfully, it's not too long a flight. But again, Adventures by Disney has it all handled. The airport is kind of like whatever small regional airport you might have near you. They've got 2 gates, and I guess you still call them gates, even though you have to walk out onto the tarmac and up some stairs or a ramp to get into them.
Sure.
There's a little cafe there where Adventures by Disney has prearranged for you to have lunch, because there's not going to be food served on the plane, and by the time you get off, you're going to be hungry, and we don't want that.
No.
So lunch is provided in the airport. We head out on our little flight there, which thankfully goes pretty quickly. It is a no Wi-Fi flight, so if you were somebody like me who allocated that time to catch up on a couple of projects, that type of plane, because it's a small regional, won't have Wi-Fi for you. We make it to Christchurch, the next stop on our itinerary, where we took a botanical gardens tour. Sometimes, depending on the season, you'll get a botanical gardens tour. Other times, you'll get a city walking tour. The botanical gardens tour is phenomenal. It's done on a little tram. Again, seasonally, you have the chance to get out. There is a stop where you get out. It was the end of rose garden season for us, so we were able to get out and see that and take some photos.
Very cool.
And then we went to on our own time, so you could either get back in the motor coach to head over to the resort to check in, or you could stay in the city, walk on your own, and head back to the hotel when you were ready. Not included with Adventures by Disney, but something I highly recommend. I had a laundry service come that night because
good hack. Good hack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I arrived a couple of days early. I did stay 2 days late. There's that lose a day, gain a day kind of thing when I'm flying. I was gone for 18 days.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And frankly, I don't want to do laundry. I don't want to figure out the laundry time. I was able to meet the service in my lobby right before we had our group dinner. And then I met them again the next night when they drop off. They only need 24 hours, and this was the perfect city to do it in.
See, that's the travel specialist shining through right there. All right, listen, we're at day 5. let's hit day 6 before we stop for tonight's show and move on to the next one. I know day 6 was a packed day for you, so I don't want to rush you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. This is the last one we'll do for today's show.
Okay, and this one was another jam-packed day and such a memorable day for me. So we went to the International Antarctic Centre, which when I saw that originally, I was like, okay, yeah. So unique thing, when you are heading there, as you're pulling into the parking lot, which is on your right, the airport is off to your left. You will also see an American flag hanging.
Huh.
And you all kind of look at each other and go, we are still in New Zealand, right? It is the U.S. Air Force Base for missions to Antarctica.
Wow.
New Zealand is one of 2 launch locations to get to Antarctica. So there is U.S. military stationed there, big station. You could see some Air Force planes outside. It was pretty neat.
That is cool.
Especially when you had been gone. At this point, most of us were gone anywhere from 8 to 10 days. That kind of little bit of home in a unique way.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right, then where?
We went into the International Antarctic Centre where they quickly took us back outside, and we boarded Hagglunds, which are these really compact little, they called them cars. I mean, they kind of have like big tractor tires on them. It is what they drive in Antarctica that can drive across ice and snow.
Okay.
And so they take you behind the Antarctic Center and talk about your Disney thrill ride. The Hagglund does a test track for you.
Okay.
So you will learn how it can go through large amounts of water.
Oh, wow.
How it can go over an open crater that's 8 feet wide. How it can go over 20 tires that were laying on the ground. It definitely had a bit of motion to it. It was unique to see.
Yeah, but definitely fun.
We bumped all over. I can't imagine driving in that regularly. I was good with my 10 minutes, but it was neat to understand.
Very cool.
Really, the point of this is to really get you to feel like I'm there and this is what life there is.
Yeah.
So back inside, the next thing they took us into was the Storm Dome. And we had been told about it in advance. Even I put on socks and sneakers that day as opposed to my normal flip-flops.
Yeah.
Touring.
Yeah.
Because and then they gave us large Arctic jackets to wear.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we head into this storm room, and you can watch on the one end of the room, it'll be, they turn it off and on at points for different groups. And you walk in, you're like, this isn't cold. And then the buzzer goes off, and you can watch the digital thermometer going as they simulate the weather in Antarctica and the storm.
Yeah. Wild.
So it was cold. It was not easy to stay in there for long. Some of us made it much longer than others, but neat to see.
But yes, no flip-flops in that experience.
No flip-flops there. Off to their penguin rescue, which was adorable to watch these little guys going all over. Then we got to watch their feeding and their swim time. And then over to see the huskies.
Very cool.
So they do have huskies there that have been in the Arctic and are now back. And they're there to show people how it works, what beautiful work dogs, and treated so well. You can see them. They'll talk about what the life of a husky is like, how the husky teams work. And then, of course, there's some great photo ops with the huskies.
Awesome.
And then we're off to lunch. All of that was before lunch. Can you believe it?
I know. Some of these days, it's just wild how much you get done in the beginning part of the day.
Back over by the Botanical Gardens, actually right in the corner of the Botanical Gardens, to the curator's house for lunch. And then we went what is described as punting on the Avon. And again, knowing a little bit about the itinerary in advance, when we took our botanical garden tour, their garden is massive. And there's actually a large river that runs through it, the Avon River. As we were going, we could see these boats. They are very long and narrow boats, similar a little bit to like a gondola in Venice, except a bit wider and much longer. They seat more people. But instead of a gondolier on the back is a punter. Very similar conceptually in how they work.
Okay.
And your punter is going to steer your boat down the river and back up the river.
Huh. Okay.
Lots of fun. We finished that up about 3:30ish, and then we had the afternoon on your own. I did a city dinner tour in a trolley car that went around town as you were eating.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
Little bit of extra fun for you. And there we are, just about over our halfway point.
That's wild. Well, listen, we've broken down about, like you said, almost halfway through the trip. It's taken us 2 shows. We're gonna kind of try to finish this up with one more, but that's not going to be today. That'll be a later show. So I appreciate you taking the time to break this trip down in the detail that you are. It's a really awesome experience. I'm sure folks are enjoying it. I hope they are as much as I am. So thanks for taking the time tonight, and we'll catch up with you next week on it.
Thanks. Have a great night.
That's a wrap this week on Let's Talk Diz. If anyone you know could benefit from this or any show, please share, have them like and subscribe. And don't forget to reach out to the folks at Easy Diz if you're interested in Impressions Travel Services for any Disney destination planning. Make it a great week. And as always, keep making memories.